Hey ED 305 classmates. I decided to create a video instead of a PowerPoint or some other form of presentation because I thought I'd be able to better verbally convey why I chose this topic instead of over something that was typed like a PowerPoint. So backstory, I have a very English brain. I grew up not really enjoying math class. Things made more sense to me after I had practiced communicating it through language. And I grew up attending math classes where the math teachers were very, explain and then practice, explain and then practice. So in that style, the teacher gives direct instruction and then gives lots of problems for the student to practice in order to master the skill. And I do believe that students need time practicing skills. I think that that's crucial, but does repetition of working problems lead to deep learning, or does repetition of problems lead to memorization? It definitely led to memorization in my case, and is probably the reason why I didn't like math class very much, and one of the reasons why I wasn't totally looking forward to taking this class. But this topic that I chose totally changed my perspective. So that is why the topic that impacted me the most was learning how to create a lesson that engages the students in discussion while learning problem solving. So I read an article by edutopia.org. The article was called "More Talking in Math Class, Please," and that will be in my references. And they made this great point. Problem solving, making and using representations, reasoning and proving, making connections, and communicating mathematical thinking are all crucial skills that should be cultivated in the mathematics classroom. And the best way to do that is through the students having opportunities to engage in communication. So in order to communicate their thinking to others, students naturally have to reflect on their own knowledge and their own learning processes in order to communicate that to whoever they're speaking to. They must organize and analyze their own mathematical thinking. And if they don't have the knowledge to communicate it to somebody else, then they don't necessarily have the knowledge to retain that information. Long term, that is. So not only is it great for the students to process their own knowledge and communicate it, but with class discussion, they're also getting to hear the perspectives of their many peers throughout the learning process, which improves deep learning through peer learning. So there are 4 aspects that help discussion in the classroom be effective. 1, effective discussion gives students opportunities to present their perspectives to their peers and their teachers. It helps them verbalize. 2, effective discussion explores a mathematical problem or issue for the students to understand and process the problem better. 3, in effective discussion, the teacher acts as a facilitator for the discussion in order to lead the students to make connections. And 4, in effective discussion, the students explore how to solve problems and understand why the approach works. So effective discussion hits all 4 of those things most of the time. Communication and discussion is healthy and should be imported into math classes because it encourages that deep learning and encourages the students to understand the why behind mathematical processes, not just how to get the right answer. That's not always the best form of instruction, or the best use of your class time is only explaining the procedure and then giving a whole bunch of practice problems. While those things should also be part of a healthy lesson plan, communication and class discussion is also very crucial in the learning process. So there are 4 applications, 4 ways that you can include more communication and more discussion in your class time, and I got all 4 of these ways to cultivate communication from chapter 4 of our textbook. So 1, your introduction to the lesson. So in your introduction to the lesson, you can introduce the new idea, and you can also use the language that you want the students to be using, that mathematical language. Anything that you want the students to be thinking on that they might be regurgitating in their small group time, anything that you want them to see or them to talk about, make sure you talk about it in your introduction. Make sure you see them, make sure they see you modeling the language and the way you want them to speak. Number 2, think, pair, share. Think, pair, share works great in math classes, and it doesn't take a whole bunch of time out of the lesson time. It can be very easily incorporated into a lesson in a matter of a few minutes. So 2 students take a moment to think through a problem and then discuss their process and their solution with one another for a brief moment. And just that little moment of peer-to-peer learning, peer-to-peer communication cultivates that mathematical thinking and cultivates deep learning. Number 3, small group work and problem solving. So after the main idea of the lesson has been introduced to the students and they've been given the opportunity to practice or to see you model the skill, placing the students in groups of 3 or 4 to work a problem together is a great opportunity for the students to deepen their understanding of that math concept while practicing using any new mathematical language and participating in peer-to-peer learning. So the teacher listens as students converse about the problem-solving process. So this is also a time for the teacher to assess and see where all the students are in their learning process of whatever new skill that you've just introduced. What might need to be recovered, what might need to be discussed later in deeper context by the teacher. That's a chance for you to see where the students are so that you might have to reinforce or readdress anything later. And finally, number 4, the after the lesson discussion. This is a time for whole group discussion, kind of like a debriefing period after the lesson. The teacher can call on a few students maybe to summarize what they've learned throughout the lesson. Maybe you can ask questions like, what was something that was easy about today's lesson? What was something that you found more difficult? This is a time for you to ask any students if they have any questions. Maybe they can bring their questions whole group, and then they can, instead of you answering, maybe you can call on another peer for them to stand up whole group and explain that other person's question. And so this way we're just cultivating this atmosphere of communication, really good communication, to deepen that learning. I found a great blog that had lots of application tips and techniques to implement in the classroom. It's misswintersbliss.com, and it will be referenced in my reference page. You can check that out if you'd like to. So knowing that discussion and communication is something that is encouraged in the mathematics classroom is monumental to me. It's a total game changer. That is something that I will most definitely incorporate in my classroom one day, no matter what subject I teach, but especially if I teach math.